What's up, strongest men, women, and children from blocks all around the world? I am my block's strongest man, and I have a very special guest for you tonight, world's strongest man competitor, Gabriel Pena.
Now, homie.
Hey, Gabe, how are you this evening?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. This is an honor for me. So for people who have been living under a rock, you're a top echelon strongman. You competed in World's Strongest Man last year and very likely will this year as well. Why don't you talk a little bit, on my channel, the most important thing is talk about your accomplishments.
Well, so we talk about World's Strongest Man right away. A lot of people don't know that World's Strongest Man was technically my pro debut. I won the North American National Championships as an amateur in 2019. That got me my pro status, and I competed at the Arnold Amateur World Championships as a new pro, but my last shot at competing at the Amateur Championships in March of 2020. And that was my last show prior to World's Strongest Man. I was preparing for America's Strongest Man at the time, and then I got the call that they wanted me there at Worlds. And it was a dream come true, but talk about making a statement on one's pro debut, going for the biggest one.
Yeah, for sure. So how does that kind of change your training? You're training for Americas and then going to Worlds? Because Marcus ended up winning Americas, right?
Right. And man, Marcus is a hell of an athlete. I've gone head-to-head with him a few times in the past, and it's always been a great battle. But training for America's Strongest Man, I had a very set plan of events. They let us know exactly what we're going to be testing on very early on, and I was set on those, very balanced training, hitting my conditioning, filling all the gaps in between the events I knew I was going to be tested on. But less than a month out, I believe it was, where I got the invite from Giants Live and from World's Strongest Man to come compete. And it's crunch time, like I had been set on what I was doing, kind of fell in line with what we're going to be tested on at Worlds. But now it's the pressure of, you're going against not just the strongest guys in America, but the strongest guys in the world. Let's make sure we're as strong as possible. So my training going into Worlds was really more focused on making sure I could hit those really big World's Strongest Man level weights.
Yeah, and I would say, you're very known for being one of the very best deadlifters in the world, I would say. So was the focus on other things?
It's got to be on other things. Deadlift has always been a specialty of mine, so I know in any deadlift event that you put me at, I'm going to do well and I'll fare well. But that just means that the things that I don't like so much were ones that I was really having to get a lot of attention to. A big one, and I'm glad I wasn't tested on it at Worlds last year, was the World's Strongest Man squat. You got the big 2-inch axle bar across the back, the big circus drums on the side, and you got to come down to hit whatever stand you're squatting on. And of the three big power lifts, squat is the one that has taken me a lot to get strong and confident at. It's not saying I'm not great at it, but I really had to get out of my comfort zone and train that event because it's not something I really like to do as compared to the deadlift. But filling in all those gaps, the ones that I didn't like to train, those were the ones I was really giving a lot of focus to in that month leading up to Worlds.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was following you on Instagram, and it seems like you don't seem to like circus so much either. I like it, but I'm not anywhere near your level, obviously.
The dumbbell?
Yeah, so I just use fat grips, and I put a fat grip on a regular dumbbell, and I try to work my way up. And actually, Leifa Ingalls has really great technique tips that I've been trying to follow there. But what is it about circus dumbbell you don't like so much?
Circus dumbbell, it might just me personally, and maybe past issues I've had with elbow injuries or shoulder injuries along the way, but I feel like it's such a huge object to demand that one arm to stabilize. So for me, the triceps and the elbow takes a beating. If I have it in contest, sometimes I can't even train it a week at a time. It has to be every 2 weeks or something like that, just so that the elbow can recover. But I've gotten a lot more technically proficient over the years. When I posted my last training video of a circus dumbbell, that's the best it's ever felt. Like I feel if I get that event in contest, it's gonna be a good one.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's gonna come up at Worlds.
That's why I was training it. There's a good chance of that.
Yeah. So let's kind of rewind a little bit. What are some interesting things about your roots or your background that you think people might not be aware of? I actually have a few follow-up swimming and rugby related, but what other things about your background and roots do you think people might find interesting?
Well, we go as far back to my roots as just being raised. I'm from Texas. I've developed the alias, the Texas Titan, from where I competed. But I live in a part of Texas that's in the borderlands of the southern region. Mexico is a bike ride away. It's right across the river on the other side. So this part of Texas that I've lived in, is very deeply connected to Mexican culture, and my dad's side of the family comes from Mexico. So that even I'm a very light complected guy. My mom's side of the family is Czechoslovakian, so a lot of people don't understand that I have very close and proud ties with my Mexican roots here in South Texas. Now we move further along from that, and you bring up swimming and rugby. I wasn't in a lot of sports in middle school and early ages. I was in band for middle school and a lot of high school. It wasn't until the latter part of high school where I joined the swim team. So that's where I really developed my the preliminary embers to the competitive flames that started burning deeper. And I graduated high school as a senior at about the same height as I am today, 6'2", but 165 pounds. So literally half of my body weight that I am now. But when we were in high school, we would bench in the weight room, keep the arm muscles good for the butterfly strokes and the freestyles. But it was never anything with the intent of being super strong or gaining strength. It wasn't until I was in college that I was getting stronger in the weight room, gaining some weight, gaining some size. I wanted to play rugby, and I joined the rugby team here in the Edinburgh, McAllen area of Texas. And that's where, the real wanting to be stronger, wanting to have the form of function, wanting to just be able to connect leg to shoulder drive and just be the strongest guy in the field. That's where those desires and goals started taking shape. So
yeah. In terms of swimming, I did read that you kind of specialized in butterfly. So do you typically pick out the hardest thing there is to do? Do you like challenges?
You ask me, and I'm going to say the backstroke's the hardest one. I just can't swim too well on my back compared to the front. But I love the power stroke motion of the butterfly. Even being younger and watching Michael Phelps swim in the Olympics, his butterfly stroke, it was amazing how someone could glide through the water like that and look so powerful at the same time. So I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I did. I watched him, and I've tried to do butterfly, and I'm good with backstroke and freestyle and breaststroke, and I just could never get butterfly. I'm like, how do you get your body into that sort of position? But yeah,
it took a lot of practice, but it was fun once all the stars aligned and you got that technique down. For me, it was my coach telling me to make the keyhole with my arms on the push, but everyone had their own.
Interesting. I'll try it that way. Summer's coming soon, so I'll try it.
Every time.
Yeah. So, what lessons did rugby teach you?
Rugby, when you're pitted against another fully capable human being or a team of them, no less, I mean, you have to have total communication in all the systems of your body in terms of performance. Not only are you in a game that doesn't stop for as long as these games are, but you have the body performing maximally. You're running across a long field. You're going head to head with someone who's just the same size as you, if not bigger. And that to me was what stuck out in terms of the athleticism, was having the functional strength aspect, not just being strong, like saying, oh, I can bench press 3 plates in the gym, but being able to last a whole rugby game going up against guys who are bigger than you. And that demand lit something inside me that wanted to be good at whatever life threw at me physically.
Talk about the physicality difference between rugby and American football.
Okay, American football, it's great that you bring it up, because once I was a rugby player, I couldn't watch American football the same. It stops so frequently, first of all. Rugby, it does not stop unless there's like something serious that commands it to. Of course, the pads aspect, but in rugby, a lot of people comment on how it's a much more aggressive game because there's no pads. There are rules in place where you can't tackle someone in a way that's going to injure them. But, I mean, you're still going up against physical bodies coming at you hard. For me, it was the never-ending aspect of it, the non-stopping aspect of it. The cardio conditioning came into play big time in rugby, and I never played football in high school, like for actual, being on the team or anything like that. But I did play it, and that was the biggest difference for me, was doing something that was nonstop, 100% all the time.
Yeah, we had an intramural team for rugby in high school, and I tried that, and I remember it. It hurt.
I remember. I have very strong memories that stick out in my mind of the halftime in rugby games just being over within the blink of an eye. All I had to do was literally have time to drink my Gatorade, and that's it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So we talked about some of your most recent accomplishments. How did you first get into strongman? Like, how did you first cross paths with it after the other sports that you did earlier?
I remember watching Strongman as a young kid. Come on Thanksgiving mornings here in the States. Sometimes I would watch it with my dad or my grandfather. So there was always kind of that, early recognition with the sport. And like, hey, these guys are real life superheroes. They're larger than life, pulling airplanes, lifting boulders. But then we recently talking about rugby, that performance aspect of wanting to be the strongest guy on the field, but the most capable guy at the same time too. Tie that with the early introduction to strongman. I knew of a local strongman athlete, and just one day I decided to reach out to him. I used the excuse I want to get better on the rugby field, but there were those flames that I really wanted to try out strongman for myself. I felt stronger. I had told you that I just started strength training in college, building a bigger frame, so I was ready to try something. I messaged the local strongman athlete down here, got the training with him. Within months, I was in my first contest, and my first contest, it was down here in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. I took first place there, and that was kind of like, all right, there's a future here. Let's see where it goes.
There's something here, yeah. Growing up, did you have a favorite strongman that you loved watching the most in World's Strongest Man?
Kaz was just, you get those crazy eyes. You see him smack his head right before doing an event, but he had these monster traps. He just looked like a guy larger than life. And then in the early days of my own coming into strongman, just watching Brian Shaw, just that man is larger than life. Now getting to compete alongside him, that's a pretty profound dream come true. But I would say Brian and Kaz were two of the guys that I really, those were the heroes. And, you have guys like Marius, and then never forgetting the history of John Paul Sigmarsson. And definitely was familiar with a lot of the greats.
Yeah, all guys that I love watching. I love watching Magnus Samuelsson as well. Yeah, a lot of really great guys over the years. So you mentioned competing with Brian Shaw. I was going to ask you who you enjoyed competing with the most. Anybody besides Brian?
As far as guys I can really enjoy with competing against, no one beats Trey Mitchell. He and we started strongman around the same time here in Texas. He might have actually had a year earlier start than I did, but we were always competing against each other in the very stage of our amateur careers. He'd win a show, I'd win a show. Then he got his pro card in 2017, winning the North American National Championships. 2 years before I got my pro card, doing the same thing. We got back to competing against each other. We just competed at Texas Strongest Man a few weeks ago in the Houston area, and it never fails. It always comes down to the last event for us. We're going point to point to point on the events. It was so much fun. I've never had a rival like Trey where I get tested so equally. At least I feel every single time. That being said, I really enjoy competing against Jose Baez at the North American National Championships and at the Arnold. He competed at America's Strongest Man recently. He's going to be going for the American log press record in a few weeks. And then we go to World's Strongest Man. The guys that I'm so psyched to have competed with there, Brian was one of them, and then Nick Best was another one of them. I don't know what it is about Nick. Maybe it's the fact that he's one of the older guys. It's like he's doing it so well at being older than I am. That's something I want to be able to do too. But I remember watching him early on in my days and getting into the sport, and he was one of those guys at World's Strongest Man at the powerlifting competitions, just killing it. So I was really psyched to compete with those two. And I can go down the list of all the other 24 guys. It was an honor to be there as one of them among them. But I have memories of last year at World's Strongest Man. Anytime Brian would open his mouth to talk, everyone would be quiet. He was definitely one of those guys like, Brian's talking. Shh.
I'm sure, yeah. And Nick is a phenom. I mean, I don't know if you followed the Strongest Man in History show, but he's there with three much younger guys and really holding his own. They had that one lift. I don't know if you would call it a back lift. It was basically like a circular seat with many people sitting on it, and he was lifting as much as everybody there. I mean, it's just amazing what he's able to accomplish. Yeah,
that specific episode that you're talking about, that is one of those moments that when I think of Nick Best, I think of that. He's if you've met Brian in person, 6'8", and Nick Best is about the same height as me. There's a significant. I'm 6'2". There's a significant height difference, but when you have someone that big of a frame difference still lifting the same amount of weight, if not more, it's incredibly impressive. Not to mention he's older too. And I hate to keep bringing it up, and Nick's probably going to let me know next time he sees me. Kept calling me old Gabe, but no, he was fun to compete against. I look forward to the next time I'm with him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm older too. I'm 45, right? So I was really rooting for him on that episode, and when he hit it like gave me chills. It's amazing what he's able to accomplish. But talking about Trey's having a great year. He's looking super strong this year. I mean, I think he's going to do very well at Worlds.
The thing with Trey, I was talking to it with a friend recently, is Trey has consistently gotten bigger and bigger and bigger from contest to contest. And I let him know when I saw him at Texas Strongest Man recently. But at Worlds, he was probably around the 340 to 350 range. At Texas Strongest Man a few weeks ago, he was about 360, 365. And a lot of people sleep on Trey. They don't give him the credit that his strength deserves. I mean, a lot of that is he's acquired a person. He needs to talk a little more on his own strength. But think back to 2019 at World's Strongest Man, him going head to head with Novikov, on the stones. Trey, he routinely every now and then he'll post pretty heavy deadlifts in his training, but then out of nowhere, 900 for 3 or some crazy number. Like, he has this raw power that he taps into when it's time to go. And Trey's someone that I know is going to be on that podium at some point, whether it's this year or the years to come. He's going to be up there. I have no doubt.
Yeah, he had a 1080 helmet tire deadlift at the Shaw Classic last year that was super impressive. He just looked so composed and.
And he's also going to be one of the guys going for the American log press record real soon. So
there's a lot of great guys there. A lot.
There is, and any one of them could take it. They have some serious power in those arms.
I think I'm really looking forward to Wes Claiborne and Bobby Thompson. I think they both have a really good shot at it.
All of those guys, there's not a single one of them that I'm not excited to see what they can do. I just saw that Obi posted a crazy big log press that he had done fairly easy, and that's. Everyone likes to talk crap about Ober sometimes, but he's got some really strong shoulders. Always someone who's in contention for not just the American log press record, but the world log press record too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody can doubt his shoulder strength. I think any negativity is toward the deadlift, right?
But he's getting better at it. I've been seeing it.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the flip side of the coin, who's an athlete who you've never had a chance to compete against, who maybe is retired now, who you wish you could have?
Oh, man. That's a good one. I haven't given that one too much thought, to be honest, but I really looked forward to Kielkowski being on any of the pro rosters. I was very sad last year that he wasn't able to make World's Strongest Man, because you think of athletes who are just totally well-rounded. Martins is another great example. When you have an athlete who can place consistently high on every single event and contest, that is a hell of a force to be reckoned with. That was Novikov, prime example, with World's Strongest Man last year. But Mateus not being able to make it to World's Strongest Man, he was someone I was really looking forward to going against. So he's not retired. Things are looking good for him. I hope that I get to compete with him in the near future. That's the first name that comes to mind.
Yeah, it looks like he is trying to make it to the Shaw Classic, and that's 2 months later, so maybe some more recovery time. What are your thoughts on that? Because from a fan's point of view, I think he's doing the right thing. He's healing up correctly before he comes back too soon. Do you feel the same way?
I do. And for knowing a little bit more of this strenuous circumstances you have to go through to compete physically, he's had a lot of back injuries over time. And back injuries with a sport that is predominantly back work, you got to make sure that point of origin for your strength in your body is fortified and ready to go. So I imagine it's been a constant give and take with that one, but he's looking good. I'm hoping his back injuries can, be a thing of the past, because he's someone on one event specifically, that circus dumbbell. There is a world record waiting to happen there.
Yeah, it would be amazing to see him go head to head with Novikov on circus, and I would say Brian is still right up there with the best in the world on circus as well.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. So going back to Worlds last year, you did have a heart situation that kind of cut your time a little bit short. Do you want to talk about what happened there, and hopefully talk about how you're doing well now with all of that?
Yeah, sure. And we touched on, World's Strongest Man early on in our conversation now, but my focus, again, from America's Strongest Man prep to World's Strongest Man prep, was strength, getting as strong as possible, being ready for these events. In hindsight, my conditioning took a backseat. I wasn't doing nearly as much cardio conditioning as I should have, especially for gaining as much weight as I did. I went into World's Strongest Man last year at the heaviest I've ever competed at, between 330 and 335. And that was some big weight. I mean, any pound that I gained after 320, I noticed that sleep apnea was starting to become a problem too. I was training super hard. I was super heavy, but I was not getting rest in between those days. And especially with World's Strongest Man, we had the competition prolonged X amount of days to deal with the hurricane. By the time the first day of competition was over, my heart was just having a trouble calming down. It was like, the best way I can put it is, we had 3 hours had gone by since we lifted, and I was still beating as if I was 5 minutes off of the lift. Okay. I went to sleep the next night or that night after a good dinner. I thought I was going to have plenty of time to sleep. I woke up the next morning, heart still felt like it was skipping beats. I felt tired, like I hadn't rested at all. On the way from the hotel to the convention center we were competing at, in that bus, I was falling asleep. And it was very obvious that my body was redlining. So first thing when we got there, I went and talked to the medical staff that World's Strongest Man had. They told me that I was an AFib, that my heart was miscommunicating from the top valve to the bottom, and they advised that I didn't compete. You know, we had on that day a truck park carry medley and log press for my heats. So it's a real concern if the heart's not cooperating, that you put an order that's too tall to fill in terms of demanded activity and strength. You might have a log overhead and the lights go out, but this is not a sport, especially with such big-bodied athletes, where we take any chances when it comes to our heart. So as hard of a call as that was, when the doctors advised me to do so, I did. I pulled out of the competition. And, you know, my biggest goal is not to compete super hard and put my body through hell for a short amount of time, rather compete for a long amount of time, you know, many years to come. So, and here I am. I know I'm a reserve for this year, but someone wants me back there. I made enough of a statement to get back there. So I'm looking forward to taking another shot at a lot of what I feel is unfinished business at that stage. So with all that being said, I'm not focused on going in super heavy to this show this year. I feel like I'm at a really good operating weight in terms of my strength and my ability at the 300 to 320 pound range. Anywhere in between there is pretty good for me. Anywhere above, it's pretty heavy. I'm 6'2". There's some guys you can do it, but I'm just not one of them. I'd rather be in a comfort zone for this one. I'm doing a lot more cardio conditioning. Just about every one of my sessions that I do, I include some type of activity where I'm having a sustained heart rate. And it's paying off. I'm feeling very good, very able. My strength hasn't taken a hit. So, like I said, a lot of unfinished business from last year, but I feel as strong as ever in terms of a position to take it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think unfinished business is kind of a theme because there were quite a few injuries last year. Evan, for example, has unfinished business as well.
Yeah, and Evan, I've torn my bicep before very early on in my strongman career, but he is the picture-perfect example of how a finely tuned athlete can know exactly what they need to do to bounce back from an injury. And I've never seen a bicep repair go so quickly and effectively. The guy is back to stronger than he's ever been, I would say. He is looking really good for Worlds this year, and I'm definitely an exciting rival to go against should I have the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a lot about Worlds, but you were also set to go to Mammoth last year, which I actually did the after show for Mammoth, so I was excited to see you, and that didn't pan out. So how did that first come across your desk?
I was looking forward to that show. I mean, I knew that a lot of the other fresh new American pros, strong American pros too, have been established for a while. We're all getting together to do it. I mean, you had Bobby, Trey, Marcus, Wesley, Travis, Josh Thigpen. I mean, everyone's coming together. And I know the promoter, David Waters, really well. He has been someone who's been very active at all the competitions I did leading up through my amateur, the part of my career. So I want to do one of his contests. Unfortunately, I had been really focused on improving my deadlift strength. I got the 1,000-pound barbell deadlift right before the turn of the year, and that changed a lot of things for me in terms of how close I feel to that world record. That I was still pursuing heavy lifts, and I wound up spraining my shoulder right before that show. So I had to pull out of the Mammoth, but it was something I was looking forward to. And it looks like there was some pretty impressive displays of strength from my professional brothers out there on that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, specifically deadlift speaking, Bobby really put on a show.
It looked like those deadlift bars wound up being a little bit heavier than they were supposed to, too. And it just goes to show you he's got strong enough back power to where it didn't even phase him.
Hey, you said it, brother, not me. But yeah, you can't really blame David on that. He had so much going on. He really still did a great job with everything he had to manage that day.
Yeah, regardless of that, it's the strong. Who's the strongest? And my point is that Bobby just gripped it and ripped it. It was impressive to see as a fellow deadlifter.
It was funny because that medley ended with a car deadlift, and I think it was David's car, and it was an Audi. So I also have an Audi. I said, I'm not letting that guy anywhere near my car.
Yeah, I've had my truck be used at deadlifts before in competition by other athletes. I have a butt imprint on my tailgate from when someone slammed a little too hard on it. And I mean, I guess they were flexing their ass pretty hard because it was Right in.
That's funny. Yeah,
Anyways,
Travis actually ended up with an inadvertent PR because of the misload on the 9-inch deadlift. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Talk about someone who I'm really excited to see at Worlds this year. He's
Absolutely.
a Texas legend, so to see his name back on the roster is really cool. I want to see what he's got.
Yeah, he's been on my channel too, and boy, can that guy tell a story! Like it's he's captivating when you talk to him.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you get clued into someone's personal journey through the steps of this sport in their own careers, it's great insight and it's powerful to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you consider doing Mammoth next year if David gives you a call?
I've always got an open mind for it, and Dave is someone that I've known for a while, so I'm definitely open to that suggestion. But I've learned really quickly that years tend to pack up very, very fast when you're raring to go.
Yep.
So, but yeah,
for sure.
He'll let me know, I'm sure.
Awesome. So another thing I was wondering is kind of, non-strength athletes might not appreciate the eating that goes along with strongman. So is it something that's a chore for you that you've had to build up over the years, or is it something that comes kind of more naturally at this point?
It's not something that comes naturally, but it is something that I've had to train myself over the years. We go back to the rugby days, go back to even before that. I started strength training just shy of 200 pounds. So I had to really build my frame, and a lot of my early training, understanding that I wanted to get bigger, followed a bodybuilding type mindset. And it's something I learned as far as nutrition. Well, one, that nutrition in terms of fitness goals is going to be about 80% of the effort. How far you go, especially if you're wanting to gain and get bigger, depends on the work in the kitchen. I learned that very quickly, very early on, but I also learned eat for the body size that you're trying to get towards. So don't eat for someone who's 200 pounds. Eat in the way you would want to eat if your body was 230, 240, 250. Not in the terms of crap calories, but in the terms of the protein, the carbs, the fats that someone at that size would need to sustain that body. So eating was a chore at times, especially in those early days, but I forced myself to eat. I was always on timers too. Every 2 hours, every 3 hours, every 4 hours, whatever it was very structured to where over time it became habit. And I'm really good at even eyeballing what I need to have now. But talking back to how I went into World's Strongest Man super heavy last year at 330, 335, that was a lot of eating. I was eating upwards of 10,000 calories per day, easy. And with that amount of eating, it's just as hard as your training, and you don't feel good when you're done too. You're stuffed, you're sweaty, it's hard to breathe. You can only lay down on your back. And it was tough. But, sometimes the sport has specific goals where you're trying to gain. Other times it has goals where you're trying to lean down. Right now, being between 300 and 315, I feel like it's pretty easy for me to eat. I'm not really trying too hard to get bigger. I'm still on myself about making sure I'm hitting those meal marks for feeding myself throughout the day. But I feel really great. My nutrition has been something I made a point to get nailed down very early on in my career.
What happens on the day of a contest like at Worlds? Do you bring a bunch of meals with you, or how does that all work out? Do they feed you?
World's Strongest Man, they took care of us as perfectly as we could ever want. It really made me feel like a professional level athlete. I didn't need to take anything. They had everything there. Any drinks that we needed, any snacks, any food. If there wasn't something there, they'd have runners get it for us. So that was really cool. But other competitions, I will make sure to have my favorite snacks with me, usually a sugary candy like Swedish fish, or I'll have Gatorades with me, some carbohydrate powders. But that day of competition, especially the first day, you're thinking of energy. You're not if you've done your training right, you're not recovering from anything from the past few days. So it's carbohydrates and it's fats, but it's mostly carbs. Like, we need to really fill those muscles up with all the energy that they need to put forward that huge demand of maximum power. But when we start getting into competitions that are 2, 3, even 4-day events, now you have the aspect of needing to recover from one bout of activity to be ready for the next day. So that's where protein comes into play. But it's all structured stuff where you've got to know what type of systems you're trying to power. The actual work itself is carbs. The recovery is the protein.
Interesting. So in addition to all the strength training, you do coaching as well. Is that right?
I do. I'm very lucky to work with a lot of the top level athletes from around the nation. It started something small here in Texas, but I've branched out and I've got about a little over 30 athletes right now that I work with.
Awesome. So what would you say is your general coaching philosophy?
Get strong on all fronts. I mean, it is strongman specific training. If you're hiring me as your coach, it's not to get you stronger at being a bodybuilder. It's to get you stronger overall. So Definitely a lot of emphasis onto deadlifts and things like that. But, I want the person strong on all fronts. It's a very tough workload. I train all my athletes as if they're professional athletes, but it produces results.
Awesome. And so what other hobbies do you have outside of strength training and coaching?
Well, you can see I'm standing in front of a wall that's got some pictures of mountains on it. I love mountains. It's funny because I'm here in South Texas in the flatlands, but my wife and I got married in Colorado in 2018. I got introduced to the Rockies and the real high country, and I fell in love with it. So one of my hobbies is actually climbing and trekking to the top of really high peaks. I actually have a goal of trying to do as many of the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado as possible.
Not how many of those are there? That's interesting.
I believe there's 58. 54 or 58 are the two numbers that are in my mind right now. But we're getting close to about 10 of them so far.
That's amazing. So you get enough used to that, and then you're almost ready for Base Camp Everest.
Well, one thing that I've learned on the mountains is that I'm always the biggest guy up there. A 300-pound individual is not necessarily meant for long mileage up in high altitudes. So I don't know if Everest will ever happen, but the thought is exciting.
Yeah, for sure. So I was just wondering, deadlift-wise, like you're known as one of the handful of guys that is the guy for deadlift. Did that happen naturally, or was that a concerted effort?
Deadlift was something early on that I knew was one of the big lifts in terms of getting an athlete stronger overall. So if you had an exercise that had the most bang for its buck and you're trying to get stronger, the deadlift is the king of all lifts. So I became a good deadlifter very early on. Something I've always done. I make sure to do it at least once a week. So that wasn't by accident. I think if people think that I'm a great deadlifter, then that's purely the result of all the practice I put into it. But
so for a total layman like me, what's a proper warm-up for deadlift? I want to learn from you.
Well, you think of all the muscles that are going to be working, right? You want to make sure that they have active blood flow. You want to make sure that they're ready to go. You can have very elaborate warm-ups where you do a bunch of isolation exercise, or you can have warm-ups that are just a simple active motion. If we're thinking, so deadlift, the muscle groups we're thinking of everything down the backside. We're thinking of the traps. We're thinking of the lats. We're thinking of the spinal erectors, the glutes, the hamstrings. With those big power players in mind, if there is something that I'm really trying to warm them up, the rowing machine is perfect. You've got all of those muscles in the posterior. You got even the arms coming into play to get extra upper back work on the row. I really love using the rower for a deadlift warm-up. Kettlebell stiff leg deadlifts. If I want to do a fancy single leg exercise, I'll do it single leg stiff leg deadlifts, holding a kettlebell in the opposite hand and really warming up not just the hamstrings for powering the motion, but all the hip socket muscles that, make sure that there's no sticky points, that there's no points lagging behind, total communication there. So we've got an active warm-up with rowing. We've got an isolation exercise with stiff leg deadlifts. I would think the only thing after that, maybe if I needed to, was to really get my squat muscles working well, do some type of squat variation. But the key thing for the deadlifts is make sure you hit all the muscles you're going to be using, give them good blood supply, and make sure that they're ready for the angles you're going to demand. So
Great tips. I'm definitely going to take those all into consideration and put them into practice, and I'll let you know how it all works.
Awesome. Deadlift on, brother.
Awesome, man. So besides Worlds, what other exciting things are on your horizon?
So for this year, I'm also set up to do the Rainier Classic in Seattle on August 7th. That one's going to be my next competition after Worlds. I'm training right now as if I'm going into Worlds. Being on the reserves is just – it's an absolute honor. They want you there. If anything happens to the guys, you got to be ready to go. So I'm training as if I'm doing Worlds in June. Next one will be the Rainier Classic in Seattle on August 7th. I did see that Giants Live announced the World Deadlift Championships. I do feel like I'm one of the best deadlifters in the world. I feel like I'm one of the only guys on, if I had to put a list of 10 people together, I'm one of the guys on the list who can do that 502 kg deadlift. So I put in my bid. If I get an invite, that'd be great. That would be August 17th. If I do get the invite, then I will probably back out of the Rainier and focus on that World Deadlift Championships. My two biggest goals for this year, you can even go to my gym and see them on a little board that I have all my members write their goals were to podium at World's Strongest Man and to make an attempt at the world record deadlift. So if I could get the shot at doing both of those in the same year, I'm going to take it. But I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. So I'm still planning on the Rainier right now in Seattle. Later on in the year, I haven't moved too far in advance in terms of my own contests, but I'm really looking forward to those two. I am an active promoter down here in South Texas for Strongman Corporation, so I do host events throughout the year. We've got one coming up in May 25th, South Texas Strongest. I'm going to co-host one in New Braunfels, Texas on July 31st. And then I've got another competition I'm going to put on at South Padre Island on September 25th. So whether I'm competing or doing contests as a promoter, I've got a lot of stuff going on in the next few months, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely shoot me links to all that stuff. I'll help promote it for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Seattle, I think Maxime Boudreau's going to be there as well. He mentioned Seattle a bunch when I interviewed him recently.
I wouldn't be surprised. And Max is just an incredible athlete, too. The guy is one of the other guys who, he doesn't necessarily have any big weaknesses, maybe some small weaknesses, but there are events like the Farmers and the Log Press where he just turns up and makes some serious points. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't show up to the Rainier. I would be very surprised. Let's put it that way. I did California Strongest Man in 2019 before I was a pro, and Max was there. So I feel like anything on the West Coast, if it's a good pro show, he'll be there.
Yeah, anything, I won't call it a weakness, but anything that's just not an absolute strength, he's been working on. So yoke and stones, he's been working on a lot this year. He's closing in on a 500 Atlas stone. So he's really, really
good. His deadlifts are looking stronger and stronger by the month, too. So he's looking right on point.
Yeah, for sure. So besides all the shows that you just mentioned, as we wrap up, I've had a blast. I've learned so much about your background. Still a big fan, like I always have been. I think the audience have learned quite a lot. Anything else you'd like to promote? Tell people how to follow you. Cerberus, it looks like. Any other sponsors you'd like to shout out? Feel free to call out anything you like.
Well, besides Cerberus, I work with Depth Before Dishonor Squat Company, Fraternity of Giants, a local Austin company. I'm with All Max Nutrition. I think they've got the best supplements in the game, and I work with Cannabolic CBD out of the East Coast. So any of those, I've got discount codes. If anyone's interested, check them out on my Instagram, at Texas Titan Gabe. One thing that I want to say to you, I'm so psyched that you had me on the show. I know I was set to be on earlier around the Mammoth time, but I'm glad it worked out to where I could come on here. I talked to a lot of my friends in the sport, and I'm always wondering, what things do we have to do to make strongman as big in the States as it is overseas in Europe and the UK? And I think any way that we can get more in touch with our fans or more in touch with the supporters here in the States is great. And this is exactly that. So I'm really grateful that you had me on. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the kind words. That's what I'm trying to do, because I figure, these people, men and women, are superhuman. They're doing incredible things, and they really deserve more attention. And anything I can do to bring that positive attention to you, I'm happy to do. So very excited that you were able to come on. I know you're a super busy guy, and thanks again for joining. Maybe after Worlds we talk again. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down.
Awesome, man. Well, take care. Thanks again for joining, and we'll talk again soon.
You got it.
So if you like this video and haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing using that button right there. And also stay tuned for some other videos that you might love blooping up right there. This one is the one that YouTube thinks that you will like the best, and this one is the one that I think you will like the best. As always, share this with everyone, and until next time, ciao, homie.